Welcome to this explainer. If you look at the world today, no matter where you live, you're probably seeing the exact same headlines. We're talking soaring wealth inequality, incredibly toxic political polarization, institutions completely losing the public trust, and politicians shattering traditions that have stood for decades. It's so easy to feel like what we're living through right now is totally unprecedented, right? Like it's this unique crisis born out of the internet and modern capitalism. But the reality is, we have actually seen this exact same rot before. Over 2,000 years ago, the Roman Republic went through this identical unraveling.
So let's actually trace those modern headlines backward in time. When the U.S. founders sat down in 1787 to design a new government, they looked straight back to Rome. And they didn't do it because they admired Rome's power. They did it because they were terrified of its fate. They understood a really crucial historical lesson. Democracies simply do not collapse overnight. The unraveling takes decades, and it happens through this really slow, quiet erosion of the rules.
Let's jump right into that first major warning sign, the death of political norms.
Think about it like this. Every single democracy basically runs on two totally distinct systems. On one hand, you have your written laws, the Constitution, your legal statutes, the stuff that's down on paper. But then, arguably more importantly, you have what the Romans called mos maiorum, which translates to the way of the ancestors. These are the unwritten rules. We're talking about political norms, basic civility, and the willingness to gracefully concede a lost election. It turns out, paper institutions don't actually protect a democracy. It's these unwritten norms that act as the social glue keeping the whole thing together.
A perfect and really tragic example of this breaking down is Tiberius Gracchus back in 133 BCE. He wanted to pass some very popular land reforms, and to do it, he essentially weaponized those unwritten rules for a short-term partisan victory. When he faced a veto, he just bypassed the Senate entirely. Well, the conservative establishment didn't just push back, they retaliated with unprecedented political violence, literally murdering Tiberius in the streets. The chilling lesson for us here is that once winning justifies breaking the norms, democracy stops being a negotiation. It just becomes a street fight.
Which brings us to our second warning sign. Honestly, if you really want to understand why political systems destabilize, you always have to follow the cash.
Before Rome became this massive, sprawling empire, it relied heavily on free Roman farmers. These were small landholders who basically formed the backbone of the citizen military. But as the empire expanded, the top 1% started buying up all the land to create these massive corporate-style mega-plantations called latifundia. And they ran these entirely on enslaved labor. The everyday citizen literally could not compete with that. It's a profound 2,000-year-old mirror to the economic displacement we see today with deindustrialization and automation.
So, you have all this economic desperation building up, and it just cracks the system wide open. Enter General Gaius Marius in 107 BCE. He eliminates the property requirements for the military, which allowed the poorest, most desperate citizens to finally join the army. The catch? The state didn't guarantee their pensions. So suddenly, these impoverished soldiers had to rely entirely on their generals to get their retirement funds and land. Almost overnight, the military's loyalty shifted away from the republic itself and directly into the hands of charismatic individuals.
And we have to ask ourselves, what happens when armies, or even fiercely loyal political factions, stop serving the nation and start serving a specific person? When everyday people feel like the system is fundamentally rigged against them, they stop looking for policy fixes and start looking for a personal champion. That exact dynamic paved the way for demagogues like Sulla and eventually Julius Caesar to march their own loyal legions right into Rome. Strongmen aren't the cause of a broken republic, they're the ultimate symptom of one.
Now, you might be wondering, how does the general public just sit by and let this happen? Well, that is our third warning sign, the distraction economy.
The Roman satirist Juvenal literally hit the nail on the head when he wrote, "The people have abdicated our duties, and anxiously hopes for just two things, bread and circuses." This was a brilliant, incredibly cynical strategy known as panem et circenses. The state provided heavily subsidized food and these unimaginable bloody spectacles to keep everyday citizens completely tuned out of their civic duties.
Just picture the Circus Maximus. You have 250,000 cheering fans totally absorbed in gladiator fights and chariot races. Sound familiar? Today, our equivalent is sitting right there in your pocket. Between algorithmic media, infinite scrolling, the 24/7 outrage news cycle, and viral entertainment, the delivery system has definitely changed, but the effect is absolutely identical. When a society is too busy being outraged or entertained to care about deep structural crises, democracy just quietly withers away in the background.
Beneath all of that cultural distraction lies our fourth warning sign: imperial overstretch.
Because at the end of the day, you absolutely cannot sustain a political system on a bankrupt balance sheet caused by endless foreign wars. To fund their massive expanding military borders, Rome had to pay its bills somehow. They obviously couldn't issue digital bonds back then, so they secretly started debasing their own currency. Under Augustus, the primary coin, the denarius, was 95% silver. Fast forward to the late 3rd century, it was less than 0.5%. This sparked massive hyperinflation that completely obliterated the Roman middle class. It's a truly haunting precursor to modern sovereign debt crises and endless quantitative easing.
And that sets the stage for our fifth and final warning sign: the illusion of democracy.
This is where we meet Julius Caesar's adopted son, Augustus. Now, Augustus was a calculating political genius. He figured out a vital secret. The masses don't actually care who holds absolute power, as long as you maintain the comfortable traditional facade of democracy. So he executed this brilliant sleight of hand. Step 1, he publicly resigned his emergency dictatorial powers. Step 2, he kept all the optics of the Senate intact and kept holding elections. But step 3 was the kicker. He secretly maintained absolute control over the treasury and the military, while humbly asking to just be called the first citizen. He effectively hollowed out the republic from the inside out.
Today, political scientists actually call this democratic backsliding, because modern authoritarianism doesn't usually roll into town with tanks and military parades anymore. Instead, competitive autocracies will maintain elections and keep their parliaments open, all while quietly packing the courts, manipulating voting districts, and weaponizing regulatory agencies against their rivals. It is Augustus's exact playbook. You don't declare yourself a dictator, you just use the language and the institutions of democracy to consolidate executive power.
So, with all that said, are we just trapped in this historical loop? Or can we actually use Rome's warnings to save modern systems?
There is this incredibly haunting observation from the Roman historian Livy. Watching his republic fall apart, he wrote, "We can endure neither our vices nor their remedies." Basically, the Romans knew exactly why their system was failing, but the political willpower required to compromise, to sacrifice personal wealth, and to actually restore a sense of civic duty, it was just too painful for anyone to attempt. They saw the problems clear as day, but they flat out refused to take the medicine.
But here is the good news. We are not doomed to repeat history. Looking straight at the fall of Rome, we can actually build a 5-point checklist to protect modern democratic systems. Number 1, defend political norms even when it inconveniences your own political side. 2, rebuild the middle class. 3, reject hero worship. Remember, true democracy relies on strong, resilient institutions, not charismatic saviors. 4, resist the distraction economy and actively engage in your community. And 5, practice civic compromise. We have to treat our political opponents as fellow citizens sharing a country, not as existential enemies to be destroyed.
So, I want to leave you with a question to really chew on. What do you think is the absolute biggest lesson modern politics needs to learn from ancient Rome? The story of Rome isn't just a bunch of dusty marble statues and gladiator movies. It's a living, breathing cautionary tale of a civilization that completely forgot what made it free in the first place. The Rubicon is always out there, waiting, but the choice to cross it or to turn back remains entirely in our hands.
Please like and subscribe.